Hi, my name is Joe Dusseldorp, and today I'm hosting my first live on Instagram. I've been on the other side of this a number of times with my two guests today, interviewed in fact by both my guests, and so I guess you could say I've been trained by the best in the biz. So if there are any technical errors today, there are no excuses essentially. But thanks very much for joining us, whether you're here live with us today or watching this, a recording of this today. So let's get going. And firstly, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of the lands that I'm taking this live from and the lands that I'm from, which is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And the elders of these lands have been passing on knowledge verbally for thousands of years, and I believe that that's no less important today. And in fact, why I think platforms like this and sort of social enterprises like this is so important. As I said, my name is Joe and I'm a reconstructive plastic surgeon based at the Chris O'Brien Lifehouse in Sydney, and I specialise in both delayed and immediate DIEP flat breast reconstruction. I'm also the creator of a YouTube series called DIEP Answers, where I try to answer all of the most common questions I get asked by my patients on a daily basis when they're facing the prospect of a mastectomy and wanting to know more about their breast reconstruction options. Our topic today is going to be to discuss what are the best freely available resources for women that women can access to make informed decisions about their breast reconstruction journey. And so I've asked both Terry and Luan to join me today to discuss this topic, and really I hope that it will form a resource for women in the future that they can refer back to try and find answers for questions that they might be having difficulty finding answers to. And there has been some recent research by the BCNA, the Breast Cancer Network Australia, that surveyed hundreds of women, literally up to thousands of women, I think, that showed that women want a more complete picture of breast reconstruction than what we currently offer in the medical industry. They want to not just hear from doctors about their treatment options, but they want to hear from women who have lived experience of the different treatment pathways. They want to understand the surgery, but not just the physical nature of the surgery. What's the physical effect, what's the psychological effect, and what's the emotional impact of these kind of operations. And so basically I think what that boils down to is they want realistic expectations. And so that's what we're going to be talking about in this live, and sharing with you resources that can help you or a loved one that you may know make a more informed choice about their breast reconstruction options. And so I'd like to just let you know what you can possibly do to join us on this comment or an online resource we haven't mentioned in the live. Perhaps please share that in the comments box so that that's there that we can use as a growing resource. And a reminder that anyone watching the live can see your comments and see your name when you've joined. But before I bring our guests in, I would like to just make a quick mention that this obviously doesn't constitute individual medical advice. So for personalized advice, please make a formal consultation with your surgeon, your breast surgeon or plastic surgeon, or appropriately qualified specialist in your country, wherever that may be. So let's see if we can get our guests in. Okay. I promise no technical errors. That was obviously not going to be a reasonable thing. There we go.
Hey, Joe.
Hi, Luan. I'm glad to see one face joining us. That's great. Hopefully Terry's not far behind.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll be joining. We've just been messaging beforehand going, oh, how excited are we? So awesome. Yeah, I know she's all set. Yeah. So good morning. How are you going?
I'm great. Yeah, it's a little bit nerve-wracking doing this. I know you know that more than anyone else. But so far we're good. The technology hasn't abandoned us just yet. So it's good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your live. I'm really thrilled to be part of it, your first one. And yeah, I was just thinking, you know, it's almost 3 years to the day since we did our first live. So it's like full circle.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a real nice synergy to how this has come together today. And obviously the fact that we met, you know, over a live with this
Terry
guest that just joined us. Hi, Terry.
Hi. How's everybody doing?
Really great. Really great. Yeah. So good to have you joining us. This is like a real kind of OG moment, the two of you together on a live. How special is that? It's great.
Well, it's a reunion.
It is, until we can do
Absolutely.
it in person. Yeah.
Yeah,
That will
it's
happen.
great to see you both. Thanks for having me today, Joe. Great to see
It's a
you,
pleasure.
Luann.
Hi, Terry.
It's a real pleasure. So I might quickly introduce both of you, if that's okay, for any of our viewers that don't know you, which I would be amazed if there is anyone, but I will try and cut to the chase. But firstly, to you, Terry. So you're one of the first people I actually met who was actively involved in getting information about DIEP Flap out there to those who need it. I think through your DFC Foundation, you support women in so many ways. You have the Facebook group, the podcasts, the lives, the online resources, and in real life, I know you go and hit the pavements as well, which is amazing. You share not only your lived experience, but also you're kind of the original breast reconstruction journey member of your journey group, and I think the way you live your life now, many years later, is an inspiration to a lot of us. I would say that you don't just educate patients, you also have created a robust group of journey surgeons, and I think that's I've made some great connections through your platform, so I would like to say thank you for that as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think
That's lovely. Thank you.
I know it means a lot to you, and it's something which we'll get into in a little bit more. But I'm now to my second guest, Luann. The first person that I actually connected with from Australia through this whole Instagram live process, all the way, having a live with Terry was quite, an interesting kind of circle back today, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, Luann, I think what's amazing about what you've done is you've really changed the landscape for women seeking information about reconstruction. Wherever I see your familiar yellow rewritten me posts, I know you're about to draw out some of really valuable information from one of your podcast guests, whether it be an expert surgeon or someone with lived experience or someone who's trying to advocate about a particular part of this, very complex journey that is breast reconstruction. So, you have a real knack for making us all a little bit better at delivering our piece of the education pie. And you do it with a really open and honest approach. And so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Joe. And thank you and Terry both for sort of being that kind of inspiration really for me to start on this kind of patient advocacy pathway. And, and obviously both being guests on stuff that I've done before. So thank you. That's really lovely, Joe. Thanks so much.
Not at all. No worries. Well, let's get into it, because I feel really lucky to have you here. And I know we're at different time zones and different sides of the world, but, let's really, what I want this today to be is to be an open discussion about, what are the best freely available, resources for women. And obviously, there's a plethora that we can't perhaps list every one, but that people might actually watch this back later on and be like, oh, I should check out that piece of information because of that resonates with me. So I might start with you, Terry, because you've been educating people about breast reconstruction and particularly DIEP Flap for a long time, and your background is as an educator, as a teacher. You told me previously about, your prior life. And so as a teacher and as an educator, why is it important to create resources in different formats? And how does that support shared decision-making, do you think?
I never stepped into a classroom, Joe, when I was a teacher and said, okay, this lesson's going to fit everybody. Because I had a classroom of, learners. And so, I think of learning modalities. I think of listening, watching, note-taking, writing. We all learn differently. It's not just that. I mean, we all have different lifestyles. So I wanted to curate content. If a woman is, on a trip and, she's on a business trip and she wants to plug in her headphones and listen to a podcast, whether it's mine or Luann's, then she has the time to do that. That's a great platform to do that. And they can take notes while they're doing that. If a person is more inclined to watch a video, I have curated a lot of video content so they can actually watch it. And then, of course, there is my blog, which I write content for that. And some people just like to read and absorb that kind of story and that kind of information from that. But I think what's important is that they can re-access any of that and go back and listen to it. I think the strongest thing for me and why I've done it is so that they can take whatever platform they're using, and we're talking tonight about resources and empowerment. I want them to be able to gain confidence so that when they're ready to start planning their reconstruction and they're sitting in front of someone like you, Joe, they have the proper resources, they have formulated the proper self-confidence and voice to sit there in a time which we all know is very challenging for women and men when they are newly diagnosed or they have faced the information that they're at high risk.
Absolutely.
So I just,
No, that's really, really valuable information. And I think it speaks volumes as to what you're trying to do. And I think what we're all trying to emulate, which is kind of delivering different styles of content to meet the needs of different people. And I think maybe people at different stages of the process as well.
Yeah.
I mean, Luan, I think that one of the things that you've really been strong on is this idea of informed question asking, and that was sort of where Terry got to. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you mean by that and why you think that's so important?
Yeah, so informed question asking, or IQA that I call it, and before I explain, I just want to say, there's no such thing as a silly question, right?
Yeah.
But if you're wanting to talk to your medical team either at the first appointment or follow-up appointments, it's about informing those questions, and that looks at three areas really. About what's important to you, know you, and that can be about knowing that you don't know anything, right? And you're saying to your surgeon, I absolutely know nothing. Yeah, right. You need to start. I don't even know what breast cancer is or how that is or whatever. So it's really reflecting on yourself and knowing you and knowing what's important to you. And that can help inform that question. But then also looking to, evidence-based and evidence-informed resources. So you might do some research. And I know everybody says, oh, don't go on Google. But look, we're going to go on Google, right? We're in an information society. And really, I think it's better to have an open conversation with your surgeon to say, I've looked on Google and I saw this, and what does that mean? So, some evidence-based resources, though, are primarily what you want to be looking at. Or it might be information that your surgeon has given you previously. So taking what you know or you don't know, what's important to you, taking that evidence-based information, but then, reaching out and speaking to people with a lived experience to find out what their thoughts are or what their experiences are on what they've had, and bringing those three things together to inform your questions. Now, this is the key difference is I'm not suggesting that this informs the answer that you arrive at, right?
Yeah.
It's about informing the question that you then ask your team. And for me, it might be, I think, particularly around DIEP, people were really concerned about recovery. And often we hear recovery is 6 weeks, you'll see that in a lot of the literature and the online resources. But then if you speak to somebody with a lived experience, that can be very different, particularly if they've had DIEP reconstruction within 4 or 5 weeks of finishing chemotherapy, and it's a double, that's very different to my experience. So that's what I think informed question asking is really important. No question is a silly question, but kind of triangulate, to use that term from 24, if anyone remembers that TV show where they triangulate everything and they put in what is it, what's important to you, what do you know or don't know, what's the evidence or your research showing you, good research, and then what is somebody with a lived experience or a patient advocate letting you know, and let that inform the question that you ask your team. But ultimately it's asking the team and help it, to let the team know what's important to you, so you arrive at that shared decision making that we talked about.
Yeah, and so what I guess I was, I'm wondering if I put myself in someone's shoes. There are different ways to get lived experience kind of insights. Obviously some people happen to know someone who's had an operation, or they have a family member or a family member. A lot of people don't, though, and they might be the first person in their family to be going through a breast reconstruction journey or having to face a mastectomy. What do you see as the best ways for women to find that? Like, we often offer people to talk to other patients, and we've got thankfully a large group of women that are happy to be contacted. But you know, it may be even before they're meeting someone like me, they might want to do some you know, Facebook groups, I guess, are one thing. Maybe Terry, you know, do you want to talk about the DFC group and what you think are really the strengths of online forums? Are there any challenges maybe as well in those kind of forums? Like maybe let us know about Facebook and what that's like.
They're great for building community. To me, that is key. I can share a story with you here in a minute. The challenges are many too. It takes work to curate a positive forum that is evidence-based, like Luan said. So what does that mean, evidence-based? You know, when you curate a forum like Deep Sea Journey, Breast Reconstruction After Mastectomy, that's our group on Facebook. First and foremost, you have to listen to patients. You have to be open to listen to patients. But then you have to let them know that this is an evidence-based supportive group. And sometimes you have to make hard decisions about that. And it took a couple of years to get that group to realize that that was not a group that was going to be based on emotion. It was going to be based on support and evidence. So evidence means sharing surgical techniques, like, you know, things that you do, Joe, that you've done that are proven success. It's sharing information like clinical trials or resources that people have invested time and money you know, to put into scientifically proven theories and studies. So that's evidence-based, if you want to, you know, just narrow it down very narrowly. But yes, there are definitely challenges. And to me, one of the biggest challenges right now is keeping up with the speed and the technological changes, because you can't use that as an excuse. If you're going to be in this space, you have to say to yourself, I'm going to learn these resources, I'm going to try to keep up with it, but you have to find the balance too. I don't think we can always measure SEOs, likes, algorithms. I don't think that always should be our focus. And it can be in these groups. I'm going to share that story now. Okay. And I actually wrote down some notes. If I can just take a minute to do that,
please.
Because we're talking about patient stories today. This lady that made this comment was so powerful to me, and it resonated with me so much. I had a community event here in Seattle at the end of November. And there was probably 20 to 30 in that group, various stages of breast reconstruction. Some were planning, some were having reconstruction that very week. Some had it, they were in recovery, they were supporting others. But this lady said, I'm going to read it so I don't misread it. Yep. She said, for me, the most important topic was standing up for myself and what I wanted. Thanks again for addressing being our own advocate. I don't know who's in this forum tonight. You've got a great audience. And if Dr. Crisopolo, who did my reconstruction, who you know, Joe, who you've interviewed, Luan, she was referencing a podcast that we had done together on this. And so you don't know. I think about that, and I think that she said that in front of a community of 20 or 30. She also said it in my Facebook group. You don't know which ears that's going to land on, and then you don't know which next person that's going to impact. So advocacy can take the form of what we're doing tonight, or it can take the form of one person making one comment and you have no idea what the impact is.
Yeah.
Throw the SEOs, the algorithms out the window, because when somebody says something like that, it
Yeah.
makes a difference.
That's so nice. That's great.
And I think as
definitely,
well, that's really interesting point, Terry, because it was something that I was thinking about when we were talking about doing this and the different platforms that we can use and the different formats of things. And I think, you know, of resources. And I think sometimes a resource that's created isn't only about the information that's within that resource, right? So I'm thinking about the Breast Recon 101 live Q&A series that I did. That obviously was passing on information, but just like you know, the woman in your group said, Terry, it actually, people saw that they could ask questions. They felt more confident because they could ask guests like you, Joe, because you were in, you know, one of those lives, that they could ask the surgeon a question. So it became around getting the confidence about advocating for self. So it isn't only about the information, it's also about that behavior and some of the skills that we maybe need to build up to be proactive participants in our decision making and in our care, really. But I love that.
What you did, Luan, is you honored her. Whoever is listening to your podcast in the 101 series, you honored them and invited them in. You valued what you opened up their mind to listening to you and asking the question, which they may never have done before.
Yeah. And I think people talking about the informed question asking, and there's no silly questions. Sometimes when people hear, you know, a question being asked by somebody else, they go, oh, I was thinking of asking that, but I felt a bit silly asking it. But actually,
absolutely,
you know, somebody else is thinking it.
And I think, like, one of the great strengths, Luan, of the work that you've done has been to do a lot of your advocacy work live, and you've taken, you know, real questions. And we just got our first question here, which is asking to know, maybe Terry, you can write in the name of your Facebook group so she can have that as a reference. But essentially, what you know, you've got your finger on the pulse of what questions people want to ask in like real time. You know, are there particular questions that you hear over and over again that might suggest that maybe there are gaps, information gaps in what we could do better and where we could deliver more information?
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest question, right? Everyone wants to know, how is this going to go for me? How's the DIEP or the reconstruction going to be for me? You know, how is it going to look? How is it going to feel? And we're never going to arrive at that before they have the surgery. So that is the biggest unanswered question. Yeah. But what you can do is have a look around and, you know, gather the information to help inform the kind of spokes of what lies behind that question. And the biggest ones for me, and be interested to hear what Terry says as well, is that, you know, is results. Yeah. Realistic results, and not just the results in aesthetic, but how does it feel? How do I move? What does it feel like to inhabit our body after we've had the reconstruction? You know, I had a message earlier from somebody who's recently had DIEP, and they were asking about, oh, is your abdominal scar still numb and things like that. And so I think, yeah, the results for that. Rehabilitation, you know, patients really want to be proactive in their rehabilitation. Now, it's different for everybody, and different surgeons have different protocols, and you need to check with them, but they want to be proactive in their recovery and their rehab. And it's like, what can they do beforehand and what can they do afterwards? I think those are some really big gaps there. I think one of the biggest questions as well is, should I have a double mastectomy? And I think that is it's a massive question. Yeah, and obviously that comes down to personal. If you've had a breast cancer diagnosis, talking about now in that setting, you know, what is your personal, like, you know, diagnosis, and do you have a genetic risk and things like that? But I think if you don't
that's really hard.
It's really hard. And if you don't have that inherited cancer risk and you have a natural breast, to come into that decision, that's a decision that's right for you. And again, it's about knowing what's right for you and what you have access to. And I think, you know, talking about other people's lived experiences, it's just acknowledging that when patients are in groups, that is patient-informed information that they're sharing. It's not evidence, it's their own personal information. And to be conscious of that, everyone's helping each other. But, you know, that's one of the biggest questions. Should I have a double mastectomy, particularly for DIEP, because you can't have the DIEP reconstruction. You can't take the tissue from there again. And I think I think it would be good to open up some of those discussions. The other one is, am I a candidate for DIEP? Because we see so much different information. Obviously, it comes down to the patient, you know, whether they, you know, individual patient, whether they're a candidate. But then because there are, in the surgical community, different views around whether somebody has enough tummy tissue or they've got too much or their BMI is too high, it does cause a lot of confusion and angst, I feel. I don't know what you think, Terry, about that.
Well, I was concentrating on asking Joe something as you were speaking, because you brought something to mind. Talking about the double mastectomy. Joe, how do you deal with that? Because you have to present, you know, the evidence. You have to present the recurrence rate, the lifespan rate. But what about a decision that's simply peace of mind?
Yeah, no, I have this conversation regularly, and it's a touchy subject. And sometimes women have never even thought about it before they meet with me, because they've had a breast cancer on one side, and they've only ever really thought about treating that breast cancer. And so I think it is a touchy subject, and it's something which, you know, until you mention it, some women might have thought, why would I have a double? Like I'm just, you know, I've got a cancer in one breast, my other breast is healthy. And I think from a medical standpoint, statistically, for your average scenario, which is someone with a non-gene related or no greater inherited risk or strong family history, there's no medical reason to do anything to the other breast. But oftentimes people, they're one human being. They may have two breasts, but they're a single human being. And the idea that they have to live the rest of their life, you know, with the cloud of having had a breast cancer and having an intact breast on one side, particularly if they're very young, and the fear of screening can be a really important thing for someone to visualize out over decades, because, you know, if there is a lump develop, if there is another cancer develop, and I think it's important to think, how are you going to feel about that, having had a reconstruction on the other side, and knowing that you can't have the DIEP flap again, even though there are other tissue options. And so I use this idea of a thought exercise, you know, basically putting yourself where you want to be after this whole breast cancer journey is finished. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and what do you want your life to look like? And working back from there, I think is the easiest way, because in the moment of a breast cancer diagnosis, there can be a real immediate need to do something, you know, sometimes quite drastic, you know, particularly, you know, people kind of think, I just need to be there for my kids. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And I completely understand that sentiment, but I tend to sort of wind that back a little bit and try to talk to people more about what's happening, you know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What do you want your life to look like? What do you want your breast to look like? And those that can then help inform decision making now. So yeah, I think it's also different in different parts of the world, right? Like, I think we're very lucky in Australia that we can still make these decisions, and we do value people's autonomy. We do allow them to make decisions about their own body, but in other countries they don't. And I find that extremely frustrating. And I think they try to use economic arguments, or, you know, arguments about, you know, whether someone maybe doesn't reach the threshold of the 30%, you know, sort of cancer risk that someone with an inherited gene mutation might make. And I've seen Inherited Cancers Australia just joined us, which is great, because those guys are advocating for change in this space, and for women who have those inherited mutations or just a strong family history to be able to access timely breast reconstruction and not sit on waiting lists for years. You know, and so I think it is happening more. I think women are advocating more as they know more about their options and they're becoming more educated. I think we're getting there, and people are starting to have that conversation. You know, I think that it's not the right thing for everyone to have a double mastectomy. It's certainly not the right thing for everyone else to have a single mastectomy. So it's about trying to inform people and understanding what their options are. And you know, I think one of the things I've been saying till I'm blue in the face is, and I'll say it here again today because I've got another, you know, sort of forum, is that, you know, there are three main options for women facing a mastectomy. It can be to have no reconstruction at all, or to have a flat closure. And I think we get sucked down the path of talking about reconstruction so much, we forget to talk about that it's okay to not have a reconstruction. But for women who do want to have a feminine form of a breast, they want to have something, doesn't necessarily mean it has to be exactly the same shape or with exactly the same nipple, but have a breast reconstruction, then it's either an implant or their own tissue as the two main options to do that. And the own tissue operation I specialize in is the DIEP flap surgery. And that's something which, you know, you guys know all too well. And hopefully our listeners are finding ways to learn more about, because it hasn't been as talked about in the field of breast reconstruction over the last 10 years, although we're getting there slowly. I think, you know, people are hearing about it more and wanting to learn more about what that might mean for them. So yeah, hopefully that message is getting out there. I think, you know, just going back a little bit to what you were saying, both of you actually, was really about, you know, informed question asking and talking about lived experience with other women is really about setting realistic expectations. And I think that is something which then when you have that, you know, you kind of arrive at a position of having more autonomy to make a decision about what's best for you. And I think that's kind of the crux of where I see, you know, our conversation heading, and hopefully adding this little piece of work we're doing today, adding a few more resources for women to check in on. You know, what are the other resources that either of you think are valuable for women to access, that are freely available, that maybe you've heard some really good news or got good kind of reports about?
Well, and when if I could take a second to answer that first, Terry, because just picking up on Inherited Cancers Australia have just joined the room, come in the room, and you know, you're talking there about genetic and increased hereditary risk, Joe. I think it's something that they're doing, and this is, you know, we're starting to think about the intersectionalities, right, of considering with you're affected by breast cancer. And one of those intersectionalities is if you have an increased genetic hereditary risk for that. And I think, you know, when you're considering your options, being able to speak to somebody from that community or that sub-community is really, really important. And they have closed groups for people in that community. Yeah, but also something that they launched, I think it was this year, is a peer support program. So they will match somebody with somebody else who's maybe got a similar, you know, a similar pathway, or has got similar considerations, whether that's family responsibilities or maybe the gene, and where they can talk. Now, the peer support worker does not give any medical advice in any way. That is just about that discussion, you know, of somebody who's walking down or has walked down a similar path. And I think that's peer support work, something that I've done in the past, you know, mentoring. So, and I think they're taking that non-directional approach to that as well. You know, there's no shoulds, you know, they're not telling people what to do. So I think that's one really great resource, and their community group's great. Yeah, it's
almost like a matchmaker, right? I think that's where it's and I think that comes back to the realistic expectations too, is to try and find someone who's got, you know, there's such a variety in the breast cancer space and in an inherited risk space. You know, having a PLB2 mutation is totally different to a BRCA1 mutation. And those people might work entirely different pathways in terms of how they treat their ovaries and their fertility and all sorts of other really kind of complex and you know, sort of nuanced discussion. But someone who's got the exact same mutation is going to be living really the same conversation. And so that's where I think inherited cancers is great in that regard. And what about in the breast cancer space? You know, do you think, I mean, I know, for example, the BCNA is a great advocacy group in Australia, and a huge shout out to them and all the work they're doing in both advocacy, but also, you know, in getting information, evidence-based information to women, and also extracting information from patients and from women to inform clinicians. You know, I feel like they're doing it all. But, you know, any particular resources there that are useful, that you think that the members of our community might benefit from?
I think and just to do a shout out for Flat Life Australia, as you mentioned, you know, when considering you know, this live's called Is DIEP Right For You? And I think for me, if you're considering that question, to arrive at the answer, you need to consider all reconstruction options, and they might not be for you, but at least if you've considered them, then you can go forward if you decide DIEP's right for you, you know, and that's a confident choice because you've considered everything. So Flat Life Australia is a group for people who have gone flat or are considering going flat. And similarly, Not Putting On a Shirt is a global organization there. And Reclaim Your Curves is a great closed Facebook group, because, you know, Instagram's great and we can be chatting like this now, but it is open, right? I mean, I love it because it is open. That's, you know, I'm about equity of access to information. But some of the, you know, we might not want to be putting ourselves out there. I definitely didn't. I lurked. I wasn't active in a public forum for quite a while. And I think Reclaim Your Curves is a great closed Facebook group that's an Australian-based one but you know, the deep sea journey was a key group for me, to be quite honest. You know, even though
Yep,
it was,
absolutely.
but it was. We had lots of conversations, didn't we, Terry? Even though it's American based,
Yep.
it's still pertinent to what was happening. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I referred a lot of my early patients when we first entered this space to DFC because of that, and there was an absence of anything like you're doing, Luan, and I think it was such a great resource for women. Unfortunately, there are cultural differences, between what happens in America and what happens here. I think a lot of what you do, Terry, cuts through that, and is more universal and speaks to that. But I think for some of the more, technical stuff, we kind of, it's good to have local resources. There's a question here from someone: how do we match up with someone? Which is a great question, and I think there's a few different answers to that. I think what we've been suggesting through some of these closed Facebook groups, if they're the ones that are relevant to you, that can be one way. I try and play that role in my team. We know our patients really well, and we kind of know who might be someone that's at a similar stage in life, and I think that's important too. Someone who's just had a couple of kids and is managing, having breast cancer at the same time versus someone who's in their 70s. It's a different journey, and I think it's important to find someone so I think having someone help make that matchmaker is a better way to get that lived experience that's really going to help set your expectations. The number of people I've said, I know someone who had a tram flap 10 years ago, and so I'm talking to them about what it's going to be like to have a DIEP flap now, and I'm like, that's not the same thing. They may have had a great experience, they may not, but it's not what you're going to necessarily experience if you had surgery in our group. And so I think it's the same with PRMA, that where Terry had her surgery. Those guys would offer a different experience, and it's important to know what to expect with your particular group. And so it may also be that it's not you may not have breast cancer, and so to that question about, we would try and then match you up with someone who's also making that decision about whether they have to have a risk-reducing bilateral mastectomy, at what age, and to consider doing ovaries at the same time or to not. And so a lot of that is it really has to be done as a personalized I think approach. And yeah.
Well, one thing I would like to add too, I do want to say, in my private group, I have two admins that I don't know if they're watching tonight, but they are amazing. I trained them. It was the best thing I did. I trained them. We had a Zoom together at the beginning of 2024, and you have to have like-minded people helping you out on your page. It is a global community, Joe. I mean, that group has grown to 15,000. So I do want anybody watching this evening, if you are thinking about joining Deep Sea Journey Breast Reconstruction after mastectomy, you're going to be asked two questions. Please be forthright in that, because we look at those. We look out for bots. We're protecting that group by doing that. And you're going to be asked two questions before you are asked or allowed to join. And you're also going to be asked to follow the rules, which are important, because those are rules of respect for everybody on that group. But I also want to say, so like over in the US, we have a group called, there's a friend of mine, Kim Bowles, who does Not Putting on a Shirt. She's one of our big flat closure groups in the US. But here's what I would say, a couple of points. So when I look, I am so excited about your new platform, Joe, and I know you're going to talk about it. I'm not going to announce it. I'm going to let you talk about it at the end. I'm so excited about that. Sometimes I get on the elliptical at the gym and I plug in one of Luan's Rewritten Me. There are some amazing resources out there. There are some amazing groups, but I'm going to tell you, they might not all feel right to you, especially these private Facebook groups. And that's not to say, oh, that group's not so good, or, oh, I don't like that group. You got to find your tribe. You got to find what's comfortable. And it's just like when you go into a surgeon. If it doesn't feel right, let your feet do the walking. Go somewhere else where it's comfortable.
Get a second opinion on your on your education feed. Yeah, that's a really important idea.
For sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Dr. Crisopolo told me that on so many podcasts I've done with him, or interviews. He goes, If it doesn't feel right, let your feet do the walking. You know, hit the door, because it's got to feel right for you. And the other thing I want to say is that it's so difficult. Joe, I have told you this in private messages before. I said, if I'm not sharing your stuff, would you please hit me up and ping me? It is difficult enough, Luan can speak to this, to curate your own content. I mean, it is massive amount of work. We do it because we want to, because we think it's important, but it's so hard to share other people's forums. And so to that point, you know, this is a wonderful way tonight to kind of take a more holistic, global approach at what is available, because we know it's still needed, right?
Yeah.
We know there are marginalized groups or uninformed groups that aren't getting this information. So whoever's watching this tonight, you've got 3 people that want to help.
Yeah. And I think if we forget to answer any of the questions that are here, like, you know, we've got the opportunity to put out, you know, all of this list of resources at the end as part of the show notes and things.
Yeah, somebody's just saying, what's the name of the face group again? It's called Deep Sea. So the first initial of my last name is Kuti. So it's Deep Sea Journey, Breast Reconstruction After Mastectomy. That's the name of the Facebook group.
But if you're in Australia, that's DIEP.
Yeah, I know.
We announce it differently.
You see?
Translate for you.
Yeah. But yeah. But that's no, it's definitely worth being a part of that. I'm a part of that. I'm one of the journey surgeons in that, and I really enjoy it. Actually, I find some of the questions that get asked there, then I inform, you know, the information that I try to give to women as well. And I found out about things that women don't necessarily want to talk about in the consultation. You know, some things around, you know, sort of erotic sensation of nipples and things that people aren't comfortable having a conversation about. They will but have a conversation about in a Facebook forum. So it's funny, you know, there are some things that, you know, we as humans, we feel more comfortable in different situations, and that's the way it is.
Yeah. I wonder if I could just pick up on a point there, Joe, that Terry was making, because I think it's an important one, and it's a tricky balance to put it over there. But I think to be discerning with any form of information and any platform, and whether that is something you've Googled, whether that's a surgeon's website, I'm going to put it out there, whether that's, you know, whether that's a Facebook group, whether that's somebody's Instagram profile, we still need to be discerning when we're looking at that. There may not be some bias there, but it's still information that you're taking you're taking in. And, you know, like you said, everybody's different. Everybody has their own tribe, and everybody's, you know, putting information out there, usually with good intent, but, you know, just be a bit discerning around it. You know, we're talking about different platforms for how we get information. You know, there's some great webinars that are done through some of the charities and the not-for-profits that we have there, but then there might be some webinars that are put out there maybe from a for-profit organization. And it's really understanding, well, why is this being delivered? What is this being done for? Is somebody looking to, you know, is it going to be an ask to sell something or buy something at the end of this?
Right,
I think,
of course, yeah,
you know, it is being discerning. And I know that talking about people to follow and things like that, and global resources, Liz O'Riordan, she was a breast surgeon, and she's had breast cancer, and she's had 2 local recurrences. You know, she does do a lot of evidence-based reels and videos and lives on Instagram. She tends to live on Instagram. She's got YouTube and podcast as well. But, you know, I know that's where she's got a book coming out, and I know I've had a sneak peek of the book that's due out at the end of January. Fantastic. And that's and that's something she's looking at. It's about trustworthy resources. And that includes people like me, like, be discerning about, well, why am I doing what I'm doing, right? You know, question me, curiously challenge the intent, respectfully so, behind why somebody's doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think
I
guess, no, please,
I will
go ahead,
say
Terry.
too, real quickly, Joe, here in the U.S., what I've noticed on Instagram, I'm speaking of Instagram particularly, there are some great microsurgeons across the U.S. that are beginning to you know, curate some really great content about their work and breast reconstruction in general. They're they're not promoting their practice per se, but they're sharing information for individuals. And I'm just going to name one of them. I mean, Dr. Peter Henderson, I think, has really stepped up his game. Maybe it's because he's got a little Seattle connection, and I'm just throwing him a little love tonight. But I saw some of his content today. But there's others too. I'm not just focusing on him. That's something I've noticed on Instagram, is that there are more U.S. surgeons, I think, sharing this and giving information.
And then some of the work
like micro.
I've shared. Sorry, the micro learning too, exactly, is what we've been putting out some information, and I've used some animations that have actually come from the surgeons from the UK put together, because I think they're really sort of very well done, very clear, not too long. Really anyone can kind of really get their head around what is this DIEP flap. How do you kind of conceptualize that in a few minutes? And someone who's an engineer might want a greater level of detail, but most people kind of want sort of just to really understand things at a basic level without sort of gory pictures. So I think those micro learning opportunities are really valuable. I'm conscious of time, and I think I hope we haven't forgotten anyone today. I think there was a couple of other groups I made a note to mention. Obviously, I think So Brave is another really great organization here in Australia, and I know they have some international reach as well. And they really look at empowering young people living with breast cancer and also inherited risk. And I think a shout out to them if that's someone, if that's you and that's the information that you're looking for. And I think also like patient stories. Like I know when Luan, when you first started, and you put out a really raw version of your 100 days DIEP, I think it was. And that's online. People can still read that and go through that. I know that Terry, you've shared your experience in various forms over the years, and occasionally on anniversaries, I read a little bit more about it every time. And I know, and I think that I guess there are other patient stories. I don't know how easy it is for people to access those.
Yeah. I mean, somebody who's doing something at the moment, she has had her DIEP. She's in Australia, and she has had her DIEP, and she is, she's written about her recovery from that. Is Jenny O, cancer. And I did 100 days DIEP, but when I was doing it on Instagram, it was very much self-serving. I have to say, I'm just going to say it, I was writing for me, right? And I didn't realize what impact that could have at the time. But Jenny's doing some really great stuff, which is personal, but it's also, she's talking about the surgery and recovery. And, it hasn't been an easy thing for her. Some things have happened, but just like with anything else that's happened to her, that's not necessarily going to happen to other patients. But I really love what Jenny's doing. And some of the Paige Provider in the UK as well, in the US as well. She's just had a revision surgery, and I think it's really interesting what she's putting out there about breast reconstruction. I think is great.
And I would say that the people that you guys have interviewed, as well, is something don't forget those amazing people, because I learn a lot from listening to their lived experience. And so just going back through, Luan's podcast series and through Terry's, obviously podcasts, and also through you've interviewed so many people with lived experience. I think those are people that, can really share and have shared in an already pre-recorded way, their journey. So I think that's another place people can go.
Well, and I have under my blog too, I have a personal stories tab, I think it's called, and I have, there's been some amazing women who have written, shared their stories on the Deep Sea Journey blog also, and I shared also some other stuff on there of my own personal stories and just what I've experienced. But yeah, there's some really great, wonderfully creative and generous women out there sharing their stories. And I might mention the men too, because in the US, there's the Male Breast Cancer Coalition, and I know some guys in that space. And then there's who's the guy in Australia, Rod Ritchie.
I don't know, Rod. Okay,
yes. Thank you. Not talking so much about breast reconstruction, but I have had a conversation with them about that, because usually involves
Yeah.
fat grafting, and not everybody chooses that when they're in the male breast cancer space. But anyway.
Sure. No, that's really important. I think there's only one other thing that I was thinking was around the decision-making side of things. And I know that, you know, in the US, there's this this breast advocate app that, you know, Dr. Crisopolo first put together. And that's something that I think still has value, even though it's more US focused, it still has value as a way of thinking about what might be important to someone. So if anyone is thinking about, you know, ways to make decisions, I think some of the decision-making apps are useful. Broconda is another one in Australia. Broconda, we can put that in the show notes as well, as another resource that's more Australian focused. And I think the BCNA have been part of organising that, and the doctors from Westmead Hospital. So yeah, I think those, hopefully we haven't forgotten too many other things. If you guys think of anything else, now's the time, but otherwise we'll add it to show notes and try.
There's so many good ones. There's so many good ones, but yet not enough. I think that's our set answer tonight.
Yeah,
well,
I think that's what I've been reflecting on. Is there's lots of breast cancer, but bringing it down to specifically about reconstruction, I don't think there is enough, and that's why it's great that you guys are doing what you're doing, but particularly the video series that you're doing, Joe, or you've done.
Yeah, so I definitely like so the DIEP Answers sort of video education series is something that we want to be like a vibrant part of the community. I don't want this to just be like, oh yeah, I'll put up a few videos, you can look at them. Like, and so any questions today that we haven't answered, like I'm jotting them down, and we're going to use them as fuel for future videos. We've kind of put out some of the videos which are based on the questions that I get asked every time I meet with someone. So, because obviously, like, you know, we all have similar questions, but then as time goes on, I hope to answer some of the more, you know, nuanced and kind of more kind of so smaller questions, but they're equally as important. So yeah, that's something which is on YouTube platform at the moment. Unfortunately, you've got to be logged in and proven that you're over 18. This is a little bit of a challenge to accessing YouTube, which is because we're showing before and after photographs. And I think it is part of setting realistic expectations. It's really, I struggled with this initially with just sharing before and afters on Instagram. You know, I think that's something which someone can look at and go, oh, wow, that looks amazing or something. And I want that. But without having that sort of real opportunity to explain that, well, this woman, you know, hasn't had radiation therapy, or, you know, didn't have a cancer that like yours, which involves the nipple, or, you know, there's a whole bunch of other factors that actually need to be talked about at the same time as setting expectations. And that's where, you know, the video series seeks to sort of put things in a little bit more context about the stage of life, and also the goals that patient had, because that's the other thing, that not every woman, you know, wants the same outcome. And I think that's really important to be able to understand what someone wanted and where they ended up, as opposed to just a nice looking before and after. And so that's really what prompted me to put it together. And I'd love everyone to have a look at it, share it around if it's of any interest to anyone, and let me know how I can make it better.
So pleased about that, Joe.
Yeah, congrats. Yeah.
No, thanks, guys.
When you think back to, I mean, I don't know when we first met and when Luana and I first met, but when you think back 5-8 years, did you think, oh, I'm going to have a YouTube video in 2024?
No, I certainly didn't think I'd be hosting an Instagram live either, to be honest.
I know, but doesn't that show how it's changed? You know, like, you know, I'm going to put it out there. When I talked 3 years ago about using Instagram, it was looked down on a little bit, you know, because of this channel, like, being, you know, influency. And I think, you know, it's just another platform, isn't it, that gives options to people to be able to access, consume, do whatever with information that suits them. And we need to be open to that, right?
Absolutely. It goes back to what we were talking about before, about setting realistic expectations. And just, I think we do need to reinforce that this is just what that is. It's just giving people more information to make informed decisions. But it doesn't replace a personalized consultation.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's where everyone needs to really take a step back and think, okay, I can ask as many questions as I want in my Facebook group, you know, listen to as many podcasts, but until I actually get that sort of one-on-one with someone who might actually have to do this surgery, or actually, you know, in the broader sense, you know, my treatment plan for my whole breast cancer journey, you know, including my chemotherapy and radiotherapy if needed, or, you know, including my fertility, and including, you know, what might happen in terms of if I'm having an oophorectomy and menopausal symptoms afterwards. Like, it's such a broad area that it's great to become educated in each one of those particular areas, but then to try and get as much, and bring as much of what you're hoping for the future to your consultation.
And I think
Yeah.
opening your mind and empowering you to use your voice.
I love that. That's so well said. And I love that we got to the point of like getting a second opinion on your Facebook group as well. Like it's like, you know, if you don't, if you're not
Yeah,
vibing with
go and get a
not your
second
tribe,
opinion on Terry's
like,
group.
yeah, I mean, like it doesn't have to, you're not stuck in it. And I think that's something which, you know, I think only you know, like what are the resources that are helping you, you know, to come around to where you need to be. And so just like you can get a second opinion on your consultation with a surgeon, you know, you should be able to do that from anywhere you get information. And
Absolutely.
And that might change as well over time. You know, you might at the beginning of where you're starting, you might not want to know all the things, right? But it might change, and you know, it can change through your treatment pathway as what information you want to. You know, I would never have watched a DIEP, so, you know, video about surgery when I was first diagnosed, but later down the line, I was open to doing that. You don't have to do all those things, and you can change your mind at any time. I think that's key too.
Yeah.
And
well, we've been at this for a while, guys. I'm mindful of your time and our viewers' time, and so, Terry, do you want to finish with one thought?
Yeah, something just came to mind. I think I would say to anybody watching out there, I mean, watch these two people. I don't know where my hands are going. Watch these two people. I admire them greatly, but also I want to speak directly to patients this evening. We are at the end of the year. We're in the holiday season. I literally have had patients on my men on my group say, I need to take a break. And that's okay. If you need to drop off of a group for a while, I've actually told people before, it's okay, leave for a while, put your notifications on silent. There's a lot to absorb and handle when you're going through a diagnosis. Resources are imperative, but give yourself space and grace some time to step away from it and honor yourself and do something that is outside of planning, preparing, or worrying about breast reconstruction. So I also want to say thank you for hosting us tonight, Joe.
It's a pleasure.
You know, happy holidays to both of you, and you look great, and it's so good to see you. Thanks again.
Terry, you're such a pro, and we're so honored to have you join us. Thank you for that, and that's such a great way to close out the live. Yeah, thank you both for joining me, and I really, you know, I wanted to say, yeah, thanks, Luan. It's a pleasure to share this with you. You know, I have this vision that, you know, we'll be successful when we can show that every woman who's facing a mastectomy as part of their breast cancer treatment plan, you know, has education on all their options before they make a decision. And I think we're not there yet, but I think, you know, as Luan says, hashtag let's do this. I think it's not, you know, it's achievable, and we can get there together. So thank you for joining me, and I hope I've answered like most of the question. I think there was a couple of things that we missed, but I'll definitely add those to the DIEP Answers video education series, so we make sure that gets out there and in a format that people can watch and rewatch later and share. Thank you to my guests for joining me tonight, and for being their usual generous selves, and for bringing so much lived experience and just also experience as advocates, which you guys have developed over the last, you know, sort of decade really of me watching you both develop these great profiles and this great you know, sort of ability to help push this agenda forward. Thanks for making time so close to the holidays, and I wish you the best for the rest of the season.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, and thanks for doing this, Joe, for, you know, foregrounding this patient education, you know, that'll help inform our community. It is life-changing when people have access to this freely. So thank you so much.
Not at all, no worries. Have a good evening. See you later.
See you. Bye. Good night, Terry. Bye.
Bye, Luan.
I think I wanted to just finish by just letting everyone know that this video will be saved to our account, as well as Luan and Terry's, so you can bookmark it and watch it again later, or share it with someone if they might find it useful. To watch the full DIEP Answers videos, you'll find a link in the Instagram bio. I think there was a link in the notes as well. You will need to be over 18 and logged in, unfortunately, which is just the nature of the YouTube platform, and because we do show before and after videos, images in those videos. You'll also find that like little micro learning sort of reels in our Instagram series that taps into some of that information in a short form if that's useful to you. And please DM us questions if you want answers to any more questions that we could possibly fill out that series with. I would mention, if you found any of this discussion upsetting, and that may be the case for people who have an active diagnosis, please reach out to us for help. Or if you're in Australia and you have a breast cancer diagnosis, you can call BCNA's free confidential helpline, which is 1-800-500-258. That's it for me today. Signing off. Thank you for being part of this first Instagram live of mine, and I'll see you soon.